The Galactic Council chambers echoed with the weight of desperation. Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Republic stood before the emergency assembly, his forearms trembling as he displayed the latest casualty reports. 17 more worlds have fallen to the Devourers in the past cycle, he announced, his voice barely containing panic. Our combined fleets cannot match their consumption rate. At this pace, the galaxy will be stripped bare within 50 rotations. The assembled representatives' beings from thousands of worlds shifted uneasily. The Devourers had appeared from the galactic rim 2 years ago, a horror unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They were not conquerors seeking territory or resources. In the traditional sense, they consumed everything: plants, animals, air, water, even the soil itself. Entire worlds became lifeless rocks floating in space. After the Devourers finished feeding, Council Leader Vexme raised her crystalline appendage, its surface reflecting the holographic images of dead worlds. What of the warrior races? The Corallian berserkers with their battle rage? The disciplined Thanix legions? All fallen or in retreat, Veltar replied grimly. His people had been among the first to face the Devourers. Of the 12 Altarian colonies, only 3 remained. The Devourers adapt to every strategy, every weapon. They learn from each encounter and become stronger. What kills them today makes them immune tomorrow. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the translation devices. Representatives from species that had warred against each other for millennia now sat united in fear. The Devourers did not discriminate. They consumed all life with equal hunger. Deep in space, far from the council chambers, monitoring stations continued their endless task. These automated outposts intercepted transmissions from primitive worlds across the galaxy, searching for anything that might be useful. Most signals were ignored. The mating calls of simple creatures, weather patterns, volcanic activity. Occasionally, something interesting emerged from the cosmic noise. Technician Curvin had been working the night shift for 3 years, sorting through thousands of transmissions from backwater worlds. His species, the Vorthok, were known for their patience and attention to detail. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. He was reviewing archived signals from a small blue. It's a planet in an unremarkable system when something caught his attention. The planet was designated Sol 3 by the cartographers, inhabited by creatures that called themselves humans. Most of their transmissions were typical for a primitive species entertainment broadcasts. It's commercial advertisements, personal communications. But, mixed in with the mundane signals, were others that made Curvin pause. Military communications, battle reports, training exercises. These humans seemed to spend an unusual amount of time fighting each other. Curvin pulled up the detailed analysis. The humans had been at war almost continuously throughout their recorded history. But it was not the frequency of conflict that intrigued him. Many species went through violent phases. It was the nature of their warfare that seemed different. Humans fought with a creativity that bordered on madness, used everything as weapons, chemicals, diseases, even the weather. They fought in conditions that would kill most species, from the frozen wastelands of their polar regions to the burning deserts of their equator. They fought underwater, underground, and in the thin air of their highest mountains. But most disturbing of all was their attitude toward death. Other species fought to live, retreating when defeat seemed certain. Humans did the opposite. When facing certain death, they became more dangerous, not less. They had a concept called martyrdom, deliberately dying to achieve victory. Curvin studied footage from their most recent global conflict. Human soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save their comrades, pilots flying damaged aircraft into enemy ships, entire units fighting to the death to buy time for civilians. To escape, it was behavior that defied logical explanation. He began compiling a report, but stopped when he realized the implications. These humans were not just warriors, they were something else entirely. Their species had evolved not just to fight, but to find victory through methods that would horrify civilized beings. The more he studied their transmissions, the more certain he became. Humans did not simply wage war, they perfected it. Every conflict taught them new ways to kill, new strategies to employ, new technologies to develop. They learned from their mistakes with frightening efficiency. Kervin activated his emergency communication channel. This was too important to wait for normal reporting procedures. The Council needed to know about Sol 3 immediately, as his transmission raced toward the Council chambers. Kervin continued analyzing human communications. He watched recordings of their soldiers training, pushing their bodies beyond normal limits. He listened to their commanders discussing strategies that treated massive casualties as acceptable losses. He reviewed their historical records, noting how each war had made them more efficient killers. Other species fought when necessary. Humans seemed to fight because they were good at it. They had turned warfare into an art form, a science, almost a religion. They honored their dead warriors, studied their tactics, and passed their knowledge to the next generation. The transmission reached the council chambers just as the session was ending in despair. Ambassador Veltar was preparing to return to his people with the news that no help was coming when his communication device chimed. He read Kervin's report quickly, his four eyes widening with each paragraph. Here was a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of war, a species that seemed to thrive on conflict rather than merely endure it, a species that might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Veltar stood and activated his speaker. Council. Leader Thexme, I request an emergency extension of this session. I have received intelligence regarding a potential military ally. The chamber buzzed with renewed interest as representatives returned to their seats. Hope, long absent from the council chambers, flickered back to life. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system to find a nightmare in progress. The planet below burned with unnatural fires while massive bioships shaped like twisted organs fed upon its surface. Devour vessels moved through space with predatory grace, their hulls pulsing with collected life energy from the dying world. Fleet. Admiral Rockdar of the combined alien forces watched his sensors with growing amazement. The human ships were smaller than expected, but they moved with purpose rather than fear. His own fleet had been running and hiding for weeks, too terrified to engage the Devourers directly. Human Commander, this is Admiral Rockdar, he transmitted, his voice shaking with exhaustion. The situation is desperate. We've lost 60% of our defensive fleet. The Devourers have been feeding on the planet for 3 days, Commander. Kim Day's voice crackled through the CUM system, steady and almost casual, as if discussing the weather. Copy that, Admiral. We see the situation. Request permission to engage with unconventional tactics. Rockdar felt a surge of hope. Reinforcements who did not sound defeated before the battle began. Granted, any assistance would be. Kim Day cut him off. It's negative on assistance. Clear your ships from the combat zone. What we're about to do? ... It's better if you don't see it up close. The alien admiral stared at his communication device. In confusion, every species in the galaxy fought together when facing the Devourers. Unity was their only chance against the hive mind enemy. Why would the humans want to fight alone? On the bridge of the human flagship, Colonel Park Sung reviewed the tactical display with his officers. The Devourer bioships outnumbered them, 3-1, each vessel twice the size of their largest cruiser. Most commanders would be calculating retreat routes. Park Soon was calculating kill ratios. Sir Lieutenant Yoon Hae reported, Alien Command is requesting our battle plan. Park Sung smiled an expression that would have disturbed the alien allies if they could see it. It was not the smile of someone facing certain death. It was the smile of a predator that had found prey. Tell them we don't have a battle plan. We have a hunting strategy. The first wave of human fighters launched with unusual modifications. Each small craft carried experimental biowarfare canisters, developed specifically for this mission. The scientists back on Earth had studied captured devourer tissue for months, creating viruses designed to attack their neural pathways. But the delivery method was what made Admiral Rockdar's crew watch in horror. Sergeant Ojin piloted his fighter straight toward the nearest bioship's feeding mouth. The alien observers expected him to fire his weapons and pull away. Instead, He accelerated directly into the creature's maw. Package delivered. Jin transmitted calmly as his fighter disappeared into the organic tunnel. Tell my wife I kept my promise to come home a hero. The bioship convulsed violently as the viral payload spread through its neural network. Within minutes, it began attacking its own allies, confused and maddened by the human-designed infection. That gave it individual thoughts for the first time in its existence. By the void, Admiral Rokhdar whispered to his bridge crew. They flew into the creature on purpose, killed themselves to deliver the weapon. His communications officer, a young Altarian named Zilinex, stared at the tactical display. Sir, more human fighters are launching. They're all carrying the same payload. 12 more human pilots followed Ojin's example, diving their craft into devourer-feeding mouths while broadcasting final messages to their families. Each impact created another maddened bioship that turned against the hive mind. But the aerial assault was only the beginning. Major Han Sol led the second waveground forces, dropping directly onto devourer bioships using one-way transport pods. The alien fleet watched in stunned silence as human soldiers fought inside the enemy vessels, their battle cries audible over comm channels. Contact, contact. Captain Li Su's voice echoed through the communication network as her squad established a foothold on the largest bioship's neural cluster. We're inside the big one, moving toward the brain. The alien listeners heard the distinctive sound of human weapons, not the clean energy discharges of civilized warfare, but the brutal percussion of projectile weapons designed to cause maximum organic damage. Mixed with the sounds of combat were human voices coordinating attacks, calling out targets, and occasionally laughing. Did that human just laugh while being shot at? Zilinex asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Admiral Rokhdar checked the audio feeds. The humans were indeed laughing as they fought. Not the madness of broken minds, but the genuine enjoyment of soldiers doing what they were trained to do. It was a sound that chilled him more than the screams of the dying. Devourers. Captain Li Su's squad fought through passages that pulsed with alien thought patterns, setting charges that would sever the creature's connection to the hive mind. They moved with practiced efficiency, as if fighting inside living creatures was routine. Neural cluster secured, Li Su reported, her breathing heavy but controlled. Setting final charges. All teams, you have 30 seconds to clear the area. The explosion tore through the bioship's central nervous system, killing the massive creature instantly. But Li Su's team had not escaped in time. Her sacrifice added another victory to the human tally. Within 6 hours, the Devourer fleet was in retreat. 12 bioships destroyed, 7 captured and repurposed as human-controlled vessels. The cost was brutally 1,000 human casualties out of 15,000 deployed, but it was the aftermath that truly disturbed the alien observers. Human survivors moved through the battlefield with mechanical efficiency, collecting their dead and studying Devourer corpses with scientific detachment. They showed no celebration, no relief, if only the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Human Commander Kim, Admiral Rokhdar transmitted, his voice shaking. Your victory is remarkable, but your methods. Our methods work, Kim Day replied simply. The Devourers won't underestimate us again, and neither should you. The briefing room aboard the Altarian flagship fell silent as the holographic display showed the latest battle reports. In 3 months, human forces had liberated 17 worlds using tactics that defied conventional military doctrine. They've adopted our soldiers, Admiral Vekver reported, his voice mixing awe with concern. The humans have taken alien casualties into their medical bays and refer to them as family, Fleet Commander. Nixara studied the footage from the Rigel offensive with growing unease. Human medic Sergeant Kim Min had carried a wounded Corallian warrior through 3 kilometers of hostile territory, all while under fire. The Corallian weighed twice as much as the human, but Kim Min had refused to leave him behind even when his own squad was in danger. When asked why he risked his life for an alien, Kim Min's response had been simple. He's Pack now. Pack? Nixara inquired, unfamiliar with the term. A human social concept, the fleet's xenobiologist explained. His tentacles writhing nervously. They form intense emotional bonds with those they fight alongside. Once someone is considered pack, humans will die rather than abandon them. It appears to be instinctual behavior from their evolution as tribal hunters. The evidence was overwhelming and deeply disturbing to the alien commanders. Captain Song Jun had held a defensive position for 14 hours alone after his alien squad mates were wounded, refusing evacuation orders until medical teams could reach them. He had fought off 3 Devourer assault waves by himself, using improvised weapons when his ammunition ran out. Lieutenant Bei Wu had commandeered a Devourer bioship and flown it directly into enemy lines after his adopted Thanix brother was killed. His final transmission had been a howl of rage that made seasoned alien warriors shudder. The sound was not civilized anger, it was something primal and terrifying. Show them the footage from the Vega rescue. Admiral Deckfer ordered reluctantly. The holographic display shifted to show a human, squad led by Corporal Parkana. They had discovered a group of wounded Altarian civilians trapped in a collapsed building, while Devourer forces closed in. The logical tactical decision would have been to abandon the civilians and retreat to safety. Instead, the humans had done something that defied military logic. They adopted the civilians as their responsibility and began what they called a fighting withdrawal, a retreat that turned into a running battle lasting 6 hours. Watch carefully, Deckfer said as the footage played. Notice how their behavior changes once they accept responsibility for the civilians. The alien commanders watched. In fascination as the human soldiers transformed, they began taking greater risks, fighting with increased ferocity, and making tactical decisions that prioritized civilian safety over their own survival. When Private Uday was wounded, he used his own body to shield an injured Altarian child from falling rubble. It's not rational. Fleet Commander Nixera muttered. They barely know these people. Why would they sacrifice themselves for strangers? The xenobiologist pulled up additional data. Our analysis suggests it's related to their pack bonding instinct, but extended beyond their own species. Humans appear capable of adopting any sentient being as family given sufficient exposure to them. The most disturbing example came from the Centauri campaign. Major General Uday had been leading a joint human-alien assault force when they encountered a Devourer trap. The enemy had captured several alien soldiers and was using them as bait, forcing the Allied forces to choose between tactical withdrawal and a costly rescue mission. Most alien commanders would have made the hard choice to abandon their captured soldiers for the greater good. Uday had made a different choice entirely. All units, this is command. His voice echoed through the recorded transmission. We don't leave family behind. I don't care if they're human, Altarian, or Corallian. If they fight beside us, they're ours to protect. The rescue mission had cost 200 human lives to save 30 alien soldiers. By any rational military calculation, it was a waste of resources. But the psychological impact on the Allied forces had been profound. Alien soldiers began fighting with the same desperate courage as their human allies. Knowing they would never be abandoned, Captain Li Young had taken the concept even further during the psychological warfare campaign against the Devourers. She had developed a tactic that horrified both sides, broadcasting human emotional responses directly into Devourer communication networks. The hive mind cannot process individual emotions, she explained to the assembled commanders. When we flood their network with human feelings of loss, grief, and personal attachment, it creates cognitive dissonance that fragments their collective consciousness. The tactic worked, but at a terrible cost to the humans who volunteered for the psychic link. Sergeant Osu spent 3 days connected to the Devourer network, experiencing the collective death of billions of consumed beings while simultaneously broadcasting his own memories of lost comrades. I felt every person they ever ate, he reported. After the mission, his eyes hollow with trauma, but I also made them feel what it's like to lose someone you love. They can't handle individual emotions. It breaks them. The alien observers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to protect everyone they considered part of their extended family. This This included aliens they had just met, civilians from species they had never encountered, and even enemy soldiers who showed signs of individual consciousness. "They're weaponizing compassion," Admiral Vetchfer whispered. "They fight harder because they care more, and they make their enemies care by forcing them to experience individual consciousness." The implications were staggering. Human tactics weren't just militarily effective, they were fundamentally changing the nature of warfare itself. They were teaching other species to fight not just for survival, but for love. And somehow, that made them the most dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever seen. The liberation of the Vega system should have been a celebration. Instead, the aftermath left both humans and aliens grappling with uncomfortable truths about the nature of their alliance. Lieutenant Colonel Han Bin stood in the ruins of what had been a devourer processing facility, where millions of sentient beings had been converted into biomass. The stench of death filled the air, and the ground was littered with the remains of entire civilizations. The Human Liberation Force had arrived too late to save them, but in time to witness the industrial scale of the horror. "Sir Sergeant," Park Yan reported, his voice carefully controlled as he stepped over the skeletal remains of what might have been a child. "The Veganian survivors are requesting that human forces establish a permanent garrison." Han Bin nodded, unsurprised. It was the third liberated world to make such a request, but he knew what would follow. The grateful survivors always wanted protection at first. The neighboring systems there. "Less enthusiastic," Park Yan replied, consulting his datapad. "The Centaurian Assembly has formally requested that human forces not enter their space. They're calling it a security precaution." The pattern was becoming clear and deeply troubling. Worlds directly threatened by devourers welcomed human intervention desperately. But once the immediate threat passed, the reality of human warfare methods left populations deeply unsettled. Captain Yoon Seo reviewed the diplomatic reports in her quarters aboard the flagship. The language was polite, but the message was unmistakable. The Regilian Council had thanked human forces for their decisive action, while simultaneously requesting that human soldiers undergo cultural sensitivity training before any future deployments. The Altarian Republic had been more direct. Their ambassador had stated bluntly that while they appreciated human assistance, they were concerned about the psychological impact of human military methods on civilian populations. The breaking point had come during the Procyon incident. Major Kim Jun had been leading a rescue operation for Altarian civilians trapped in a devourer-occupied city. The enemy had begun using the civilians as living shields, placing them in the path of any military advance. Most alien commanders would have retreated, accepting the loss of civilian life as unavoidable. Kim Jun had made a different calculation. He had ordered orbital bombardment on his own position, knowing that some civilians would die, but calculating that the majority would survive the collapse of the devourer biostructure. The mathematics were sound. The strategy was effective. The results were successful. 200 civilians died, but 80,000 were saved. By any reasonable measure, this was a victory. But the footage of human soldiers knowingly calling death from above onto civilian populations had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The images showed Kim Chen's face as he gave the order, calm, professional, and utterly without emotion. It was the face of someone who had made similar decisions before. He murdered innocents to save others, Ambassador Veltar had accused. During the emergency tribunal, how is this different from what the Devourers do? Colonel Li Yun had stood to defend her officer, her voice steady, despite the weight of judgment from dozens of alien species. The difference is choice. Major Kim will carry the weight of those 200 deaths for the rest of his life. Didn't make that decision easily or without cost. The Devourers would have consumed all 80,200 without a moment's consideration. "But you still killed them?" pressed Judge Vakit Morden of the Regilian Court, his multiple eyes fixed on the human colonel with obvious disgust. "Yes," Li Yun had replied simply, "because sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones. This is what it means to be human in war. We bear the weight of impossible decisions so others don't have to." The tribunal had ultimately cleared Major Kim Jun of wrongdoing, but the damage to human-alien relations was severe. 3 more star systems had requested that human forces be withdrawn from their territory. Private Choide found himself assigned to what command? Euphemistically called Cultural Integration Duty, helping alien populations adjust to post-liberation reality. The work was harder than combat in many ways. Grateful civilians would approach him to thank him for their freedom, then step away when they learned the details of how that freedom had been won. Children who had been saved from devourer processing facilities would hide behind their parents when human soldiers walked by. "Do you regret it?" asked Sephina, a young Altarian whose family had been saved during the Vega operation. She was one of the few aliens who still spoke to human soldiers directly. "The things you did to save us?" Choide considered the question carefully. He had watched human soldiers burn Devourer bioships with their crews still inside. He had seen his comrades use captured alien civilians as bait to lure Devourers into traps. He had participated in operations that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "I regret that they were necessary," he said finally, "but I don't regret doing them. Your little sister gets to grow up free because we made the hard choices. That matters more than whether people think we're monsters." The psychological evaluation. Reports made for grim reading. Human soldiers were showing signs of what military doctors called moral injury, the damage caused not by experiencing trauma, but by being forced to act against their own ethical systems for the greater good. "They're breaking themselves to save us," reported Dr. Kilron, the fleet's chief psychological analyst. "Every brutal tactic, every necessary atrocity damages them as much as it damages the enemy. But they continue because they believe saving others is worth their own spiritual destruction." Major Seo Wan addressed his troops before their next deployment, knowing that half would likely not return. Survivors would carry scars that would never heal, memories that would haunt them forever. "Command wants me to tell you that you're heroes," he said, looking at the faces of soldiers who had seen too much. "But we know better. We're tools, the kind of tools civilized societies need but don't want to acknowledge. We do what's necessary so others can stay clean." A young corporal raised his hand. "Sir, is it worth it, being feared by the people we save?" Seo looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, families slept safely because of what his soldiers had done. "Ask me that question when we're finished, Corporal. When every devourer is dead and every civilian can sleep without nightmares, then we'll see if the price was worth paying." The final battle began not with fanfare, but with a simple transmission. From Admiral Kim, due to the assembled galactic fleet, this ends today. All non-human vessels fall back to minimum safe distance. What we're about to do, ... You won't want to watch. The Devourer home fleet was massive, over 10,000 bioships arranged in a sphere around their birthing world, where the original Hive Queen had been spawning new generations for millennia. The planet itself pulsed with unnatural life, its surface covered in breeding pools that stretched from pole to pole. Human intelligence estimated they were outnumbered 50-1. Most military commanders would have called for retreat or requested massive reinforcements. Admiral Kim-do simply stared at the tactical display and began calculating acceptable losses. "Sir," reported Captain Park G from the tactical station, his voice steady, despite the impossible odds, "the alien fleets are requesting our battle plan." Kim-do looked at the display showing their pathetically small force against the Devourer armada. 200 human ships against 10,000 biovessels, each one capable of consuming a city. Tell them we don't have a battle plan. We have an funeral arrangement, theirs and ours. The strategy was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. Human engineers had spent months converting captured Devourer bioships into Trojan horses, filling them with human crews and enough explosives to crack continents. These ships would appear to be returning Devourer forces, carrying precious genetic material back to the home fleet. But the crews knew they would never come home. Colonel O'Jun led the first wave of suicide ships. His vessel, disguised as a damaged biocarrier, limped toward the enemy formation, broadcasting fake distress signals in Devourer biocode. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the ship approached the heart of the enemy fleet. "Ghost Leader to control," O'Jun transmitted. As his ship passed through the outer defensive ring, package delivery in 30 seconds. Tell my son I kept my promise about making the monsters go away. The explosion vaporized Ochen's ship in 17. Devourer vessels in a chain reaction of bioplasma and human-designed explosives. But it was only the beginning. 11 more suicide ships followed, each one piloted by volunteers who had accepted that this would be their final mission. "Why are they doing this?" asked Admiral Veltar, watching the tactical display in horror. "There must be another way." Admiral Kim Do's voice came through the communication channel, cold and professional. "There is no other way. The Devourers cannot be negotiated with, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped by conventional means. They understand only death. So we give them death." Major Han, you commanded the second wave assault pods filled with human berserkers who had volunteered for one-way missions into the enemy fleet's command nodes. These were soldiers who had seen too much, lost too much, found purpose in ensuring others would never face what they had faced. "Remember, Han, you broadcast to his troops as they prepared to launch. We're not here to win. We're here to make sure they lose. Every Devourer ship we destroy is a world that stays free." The alien observers watched in horrified fascination as human soldiers laughed while diving their fighters into enemy vessels, sang ancient war songs while manning guns on ships they knew were doomed, and continued fighting even when their positions were overrun. Lieutenant Bei Sun held a bioship's neural center for 4 hours alone after her squad was killed, using improvised weapons and pure determination to prevent the Devourers from coordinating their defense. Her final transmission was delivered while bioacid ate through her armor. "The pattern recognition centers are located in the lower neural clusters," she reported clinically as her body dissolved. "Recommend focused fire on those positions. Tell my mom I love her. Bei out." But the turning point came when General Li Kong executed the final phase, something so ruthlessly effective it shocked even the human command staff. Using psychic amplifiers salvaged from destroyed alien worlds, he broadcast the collective memories of every human who had died in the war directly into the Devourer hive mind. The process required Li Kong to link his own consciousness to the amplifier array, knowing it would kill him. As the memories flooded into the Devourer network, he experienced every death, every loss, every moment of grief that human soldiers had endured. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers experienced individual death, personal loss, the weight of sacrificing others for survival. The hive mind, designed to process collective information, began to shatter under the load of 10 million individual human tragedies. "What are you doing to us?" The Hive Queen's voice echoed across all communication channels, no longer collective but somehow personal, individual, frayed. Li Kong's response was broadcast to every ship, human and alien alike. As he died at his post, "We're showing you what it means to be mortal. To lose someone you love is to make choices that haunt you forever. Welcome to consciousness. It's a gift and a curse." The Devourer fleet turned on itself as individual bioships began making their own decisions. Some fled in terror, others attacked. Their former allies, many simply shut down as their pilots grappled with the sudden weight of individual existence. Victory came at a cost that left the galaxy stunned. Of the 50,000 humans who had answered the call for warriors, fewer than 3,000 survived. They had broken themselves against the Devourer threat until both species were fundamentally changed. In the aftermath, as rescued alien populations celebrated their freedom, the surviving humans sat quietly in their ships, processing what they had become. They had saved the galaxy, but lost their innocence in the process. Captain Songmin looked at her reflection, seeing scars that would never heal. "Was it worth it?" asked Corporal Yuhan. Songmin activated a communication channel showing celebrations. On 1,000 liberated worlds, children playing safely, families reunited, civilizations rebuilding without fear. "Ask me in 50 years," she said finally, "when those children have children of their own. And they've never known the terror of wondering if monsters will come in the night. Then we'll know if the price was worth paying." The galaxy was safe, but forever changed by the understanding that sometimes salvation comes wearing the face of horror. and that humanity's greatest gift was not warriors, but beings willing to sacrifice their souls so others could keep theirs.